Hi, good morning. I just finished a video about which is from the book, the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy in Arabic. I translated from the book, which is by Judith S. Beck, this one. And I started from page 56. And it is about the relationship between the therapist and the client or the patient. And during that video, I spoke a lot about my personal experience, a long journey, how I used to treat my patient. Of course, my patient, they were physical. They come with body diseases, especially gynae and obstetric. They are women, but there are also some men because they insist to see me, even if I am female. And in our culture, a female doctor see female patient, and male doctor see male patient. But in my case, it was exception. And then I spoke about a lot of my experiences, how I used to treat the patient. Although I wasn't not trained, I did not do courses, but it came out from my soul, from my upbringing, from my personal goal to be treated. I will treat my patient like the way I want to be treated. So I was always humble, nice with my patient, to let them feel safe. And 33% of the patient will heal, placebo effect, if they believe in their therapist, if they trust that therapist. And this is how I used to work and continue to work, because it is very, very important to have a good relationship with your patient. The patient is, although medical practice is very, very hard for those doctors who are honest, who are deep, who are human, but irrespective of the difficulties, I decided to like this and enjoy it. Irrespective of the difficulties, irrespective of the problems, personal, familial, cultural, country, doesn't matter. I'm spending my time, which is my life, with these patients, so I have to enjoy it and learn from it. So now, because it was, I translate the book, and when you remember, the brain will become emotional and stressed. So I thought my relaxation for, say, 20 minutes, it will be to listen to a lecture about Einstein thoughts. Can you believe it? This is my relaxation session. So I will enjoy it with you. And I will try to translate what I translate in the cognitive behavioral therapy to the English-speaking people. And vice versa, when I go to the Arabic video, I will speak about what Einstein thoughts are. So we are all connected. And we are all entangled according to the quantum mechanics. We are all entangled as a human in this universe. We are all connected by our humanity. So now let us listen together.
Is whether it passes or whether the present moment has any objective reality.
This is, I think, part 6.
Part 6. The Unification Dream. His quest for a theory of everything.
You want one theory for everything.
Einstein's final 30 years focused on one all-consuming goal, discovering a unified field theory that would explain all physical forces through a single mathematical framework. He never succeeded. Many physicists considered this quest a tragic waste of his genius. Yet Einstein's unification program shaped modern physics research agenda and raised profound questions about scientific explanations' ultimate aims. The unification impulse drove Einstein's greatest successes. Special relativity unified space and time into space-time. General relativity unified gravity with geometry. Einstein believed unification represented genuine progress. not mere mathematical convenience. If apparently distinct phenomena derive from common principles, we have achieved deeper understanding. By the 1920s, physics recognized four fundamental forces. Gravity attracts masses. Electromagnetism governs electric charges and magnetic fields. The strong nuclear force binds atomic nuclei. The weak nuclear force causes radioactive decay. Einstein wanted to show these were aspects of a single unified field. His strategy focused on unifying gravity and electromagnetism first, since these were the only forces understood in his time. He tried extending general relativity's geometric approach to include electromagnetism. If gravity is space-time curvature, perhaps electromagnetism is some other geometric property of space-time, like torsion or additional dimensions. Einstein explored dozens of mathematical frameworks over 3 decades. He would develop a theory, work intensely on it for months or years, publish promising results, then abandon it when problems emerged. Colleagues sometimes joined briefly, but usually left when Einstein's stubbornness about quantum mechanics became clear. He insisted that a correct unified theory must be deterministic and classical, not probabilistic and quantum. This requirement doomed Einstein's program.
How did things change?
By the 1930s, quantum mechanics had proven essential for understanding atoms, molecules, and radiation. The electromagnetic force is fundamentally quantum mechanical. Any unification ignoring quantum mechanics could not succeed. Einstein recognized this but refused to compromise his philosophical principles. He believed quantum mechanics was incomplete and would eventually be replaced by a deterministic theory. His unified field theory would provide that replacement he hoped, showing how quantum phenomena emerge from deeper classical laws. This strategy failed completely. Einstein produced no testable predictions from his various unified theories. Most collapsed under mathematical scrutiny. Meanwhile, quantum mechanics continued accumulating spectacular successes, and physics advanced rapidly in directions Einstein ignored. Why did Einstein persist despite repeated failure and scientific isolation? Several factors combined. First, his enormous early success convinced him his intuitions were reliable. He had revolutionized physics twice by trusting reason over convention. Perhaps he could do it again. Second, Einstein's philosophical commitments to realism, determinism, and rationality made quantum mechanics unacceptable as fundamental physics. If quantum mechanics was here to stay, Einstein would work towards something better rather than accept its indeterminism and observer dependence. Third, Einstein believed strongly in nature's unity. The universe exhibits remarkable order and intelligibility. This suggests a unified explanation rather than unrelated laws governing different phenomena. Aesthetic considerations influenced Einstein profoundly. He found quantum mechanics ugly in its apparent disunity and reliance on mysterious measurements. Fourth, Einstein trusted mathematical beauty as a guide to truth. He believed that correct theories should be mathematically elegant and inevitable feeling. Some of his unified field theories had this quality, even though they made no predictions. Einstein hoped that working purely from mathematical structure might reveal physical truth. All these reasons made sense given Einstein's previous success and philosophical worldview. But they led him astray. Physics in the mid-20th century required engagement with experimental data and quantum mechanics, not pure mathematical speculation based on classical prejudices. Contemporary physicists learning about Einstein's later work often feel puzzled or disappointed. How could someone so brilliant waste decades on obviously doomed projects? Why did he not recognize that quantum mechanics was here to stay? These questions miss something important about scientific risk-taking and philosophical integrity.
Darlin was found terribly injured. Her back leg had been severed. I'll rest.
Einstein could have spent his later years working on incremental problems within mainstream physics, where his contribution would have been solid but not revolutionary. Instead, he gambled everything on a program he considered more important, even though success seemed unlikely. The gamble failed, but perhaps the attempt itself has value independent of success. Moreover, Einstein's unification program, though unsuccessful, established the research agenda that produced modern physics' greatest achievements. Today's standard model of particle physics unifies electromagnetism with the weak and strong nuclear forces using quantum field theory. This achievement vindicates Einstein's intuition that unification is possible and desirable, though it requires accepting quantum mechanics rather than replacing it. The standard model leaves gravity unincorporated, however. Gravity remains described by Einstein's general relativity, a classical theory incompatible with quantum mechanics at extreme scales. Theoretical physicists still pursue Einstein's dream of unifying all forces, now called a theory of everything. Several approaches compete today. String theory proposes that fundamental entities are not point particles, but tiny vibrating strings. Different vibration patterns correspond to different particles and forces. String theory naturally includes gravity and potentially unifies all forces in a quantum framework. However, it requires extra spatial dimensions beyond the three we observe and makes no testable predictions yet. Loop quantum gravity takes a different approach, quantizing spacetime itself. It treats spacetime geometry as fundamentally discrete at the smallest scales rather than continuous. This resolves certain infinities plaguing quantum gravity, but struggles to incorporate other forces. Both approaches face serious criticisms. They lack experimental evidence despite decades of theoretical development. They are mathematically complex and require assumptions about unobserved physics. Some physicists argue they repeat Einstein's mistake, pursuing mathematical elegance and unification without empirical guidance. Philosopher Nancy Cartwright has influentially argued that physics does not actually tend toward unified laws. Instead, she claims, we have a patchwork of domain-specific theories that work well in limited contexts, but do not combine into a unified whole. The search for fundamental unity might be a metaphysical prejudice rather than reasonable scientific expectation. Defenders of unification respond that history shows repeated, successful unifications. Newton unified terrestrial and celestial mechanics. Maxwell unified electricity and magnetism. Einstein unified space and time, then unified gravity with geometry. The Standard Model unified three forces. Why should unification stop now? But Cartwright's critique challenges whether these were genuine unifications or merely showed that different phenomena follow similar mathematical patterns. Does showing that electricity and magnetism share a common mathematical description prove they are fundamentally one thing, or merely that our mathematics can describe both? This philosophical question underlies debates about string theory and other unification programs. Are physicists discovering nature's unified structure, or imposing unity through mathematical frameworks that may be convenient but not uniquely true? Einstein would have sided firmly with realism about unification. He believed the universe really is unified at its deepest level, and physics' job is discovering that unity. Mathematical description is not merely convenient, but approximately true representation of nature's structure. Yet Einstein's own failure might count against this view. His unified field theories were mathematically elegant but physically sterile. They proved that mathematical beauty alone, without empirical constraint, leads nowhere. Contemporary string theory faces similar criticisms. It offers mathematical elegance and potential unification, but no testable predictions distinguishing it from alternative.
How Speak Up uses AI in the intake process, and this is genuinely unique to us.
Some physicists worry that string theory has become a mathematical game disconnected from physical reality, repeating Einstein's later career pattern. The deeper issue concerns scientific explanation's ultimate goal. Should physics seek a final theory, a complete mathematical description from which everything else follows? Or should it remain content with effective theories that work well in limited domains without claiming fundamental truth? Einstein firmly believed in the final theory possibility. He thought the universe must be comprehensible to human reason in principle, even if the final theory remains undiscovered. This faith motivated his unification quest and gave his life meaning despite repeated failure. But perhaps this faith is unjustified. Maybe the universe is not actually unified at the deepest level. Maybe different domains require genuinely different physics with no common foundation. Or maybe unification exists, but is too complex for human minds to grasp. We might lack the intellectual capacity to understand everything, just as dogs cannot understand relativity. These possibilities challenge the Enlightenment conviction, which Einstein embodied, that human reason can comprehend reality fully. If nature is ultimately incomprehensible, then Einstein's unification quest was not merely unsuccessful, but impossible in principle. Einstein's response would be that we cannot know without trying. Perhaps complete understanding is impossible, but we cannot discover this by giving up. We must pursue unification as far as possible, and only failure to make progress despite genuine effort would justify skepticism. This pragmatic response has merit. Even if ultimate unification proves impossible, the attempt generates valuable insights. Einstein's failed unified theories taught later physicists what does not work. Similarly, string theory and loop quantum gravity, even if ultimately unsuccessful, advance our understanding of quantum gravity's requirements and constraints. The other legacy from Einstein's unification program concerns the role of experiment in theoretical physics. Einstein's greatest successes came from thought experiments and mathematical reasoning ahead of empirical data. This encouraged him to continue theorizing without experimental guidance in his later work. But the strategy that worked brilliantly for relativity failed completely for unification. This raises questions about scientific methodology. When should physicists pursue speculative theories without experimental evidence? How long should they persist before admitting failure. Einstein's career suggests no simple answers. Sometimes speculation succeeds spectacularly. Sometimes it fails completely. Distinguishing productive speculation from wasted effort remains difficult. Perhaps the key difference is whether speculation connects to empirical phenomena even indirectly. Special and general relativity, though based on thought experiments, addressed real puzzles, the behavior of light and the nature of gravity. Einstein's unified field theories lacked comparable empirical anchoring. They were purely mathematical constructions, hoping to eventually connect to reality. Contemporary unification programs face similar challenges. String theory began addressing real problems like quantum gravity and black hole thermodynamics. But it has expanded into a vast mathematical landscape of possibilities without clear empirical selection criteria. Critics argue it has lost touch with experiment. Defenders respond that the questions are so fundamental that standard experimental approaches cannot apply, requiring theoretical exploration to identify what experiments might eventually test. Einstein's unification quest thus raises deep questions about how science should proceed when addressing the most fundamental questions. Standard scientific method involves propose hypotheses, test experimentally, refine or reject based on results. But this cycle breaks down for theories of everything that potentially explain the entire universe. You cannot do controlled experiments on the whole universe. Alternative standards become necessary. Mathematical consistency, explanatory power, unification of previously separate domains, novel predictions, even if currently untestable. Einstein relied on these standards throughout his career. They worked sometimes, failed other times. We still lack reliable methods for judging purely theoretical work in fundamental physics.
So if you want to make a remote income from home, and you're a beginner, meaning right now...
Part 7. Political philosophy, pacifism, socialism, world government, and Zionism. Einstein's political philosophy emerged from the same values underlying his physics: rationality, universalism, and belief in humanity's capacity for moral progress. He engaged actively in political causes throughout his life, often controversially, applying his intellectual authority to advocate for radical social transformation. His political views reflected deep philosophical commitments about human nature, justice, and the proper organization of society. Einstein described himself as a democratic socialist and a pacifist, though both positions evolved considerably through his life. He believed capitalism inevitably produces inequality, exploitation, and war because it concentrates wealth and power in private hands. Economic competition between capitalist nations for resources and markets generates international conflicts. Only by abolishing private ownership of production means could humanity achieve lasting peace and justice. This sounds like orthodox Marxism, but Einstein rejected Marxist materialism and determinism. He did not believe economic structures alone determine everything about society, nor did he think communism would inevitably replace capitalism through historical necessity. Rather, Einstein argued that humans must consciously choose to create just economic arrangements guided by moral principles. Socialism was an ethical imperative, not an inevitable outcome. Einstein outlined his socialist vision in a 1949 essay called Why Socialism? He argued that capitalism produces an oligarchy, controlling production and distribution, mass media, education, and politics. This concentration of power corrupts democracy, reducing it to a facade while actual decisions serve elite interests. Workers become commodities, their labor bought and sold, alienating them from their work and from each other. The solution required socializing production means through democratic planning. Rather than market competition determining what gets produced, society would collectively decide based on human needs. This would eliminate unemployment, poverty, and the boom-bust cycles inherent to capitalism. It would free humans to develop their capacities fully rather than subordinating everything to profit. Critics raised obvious objections. Who decides what society needs? How does democratic planning avoid bureaucratic tyranny? The Soviet Union claimed to practice socialism but created totalitarian dictatorship with secret police, labor camps, and mass murder. How would Einstein's democratic socialism avoid similar outcomes? Einstein acknowledged these problems but never developed detailed institutional proposals. He rejected Soviet communism as state capitalism that merely replaced private capitalists with party bureaucrats. True socialism required genuine democracy, civil liberties, and decentralization. But Einstein remained vague about mechanisms ensuring these values. This vagueness reflected Einstein's approach to political philosophy generally. He focused on identifying moral imperatives rather than institutional details. Capitalism was unjust because it permitted exploitation and inequality. Therefore, humanity must transcend capitalism, even without a complete blueprint for what comes after. Some philosophers criticize this approach as irresponsible utopianism. Good intentions without realistic implementation plans often produce disasters, as communist regimes demonstrated. Einstein's democratic socialism might be impossible to realize, and attempting it might generate tyranny worse than capitalism's injustices. Defenders respond that moral vision matters even without perfect implementation strategies.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Zahir Khan, the Global Director of Fundraising for the charity Human Appeal.
Well, this is Ammar.
Einstein correctly identified capitalism's failings. Whether his socialist alternative would work remains untested, since no society has tried genuine democratic socialism as Einstein conceived it. Einstein's pacifism was equally controversial and evolved significantly. He initially embraced absolute pacifism, refusing all military service and advocating total disarmament. During World War I, Einstein signed pacifist manifestos and denounced nationalism as primitive tribalism. He believed war resulted from irrational group psychology and could be eliminated through moral education and international cooperation. This position reflected Einstein's cosmic perspective. From the viewpoint of the universe, national boundaries and ethnic identities are arbitrary and insignificant. Humanity should identify with the species as a whole rather than particular nations or groups. War is collective insanity, sacrificing individual lives for abstractions like national honor.
I agree completely.
However, the rise of Nazism forced Einstein to reconsider. In 1933, Hitler took power in Germany. Nazi ideology explicitly promoted racism, militarism, and conquest. Jews faced persecution, violence, and eventually genocide. Could pacifism respond adequately to such evil? Einstein reluctantly concluded it could not. He had fled Germany and renounced his citizenship upon Hitler's rise. From exile, Einstein recognized that Nazi Germany could only be stopped by military force. He wrote publicly abandoning his earlier pacifism and supporting military preparation against fascism. This reversal troubled Einstein deeply. It seemed to admit that violence is sometimes necessary and that moral principles cannot always guide politics. Einstein never returned to absolute pacifism, but considered this one of his life's great disappointments. He had hoped human reason could progress beyond war, but history appeared to prove him wrong. The atomic bomb created another moral crisis for Einstein. In 1939, physicists discovered nuclear fission, releasing enormous energy from splitting atoms. Refugee scientists who had escaped Nazi Germany feared Hitler would develop atomic weapons. They convinced Einstein to sign a letter to President Roosevelt warning of this danger and urging American development of atomic bombs. Einstein's signature carried enormous prestige and helped launch the Manhattan Project that created the first atomic bombs. The United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, killing approximately 200,000 people and ending World War II. Einstein later called signing the letter his greatest mistake, though he acknowledged the threat from Nazi Germany was real. After the war, Einstein devoted enormous energy to nuclear disarmament and world government. He argued that national sovereignty had become obsolete in the atomic age. Giving individual nations the power to build nuclear weapons guaranteed eventual catastrophe. Human nature being what it is, some nation would eventually use nuclear weapons in war, potentially destroying civilization. The only solution was creating a world government with monopoly on military force, especially nuclear weapons. National militaries would be abolished or reduced to police forces. International disputes would be resolved through law rather than war. This required nations surrendering some sovereignty to global institutions, which Einstein acknowledged would face fierce resistance. Critics called this naive and dangerous. A world government powerful enough to prevent war would be powerful enough to impose tyranny globally. Who would control this government? What would prevent it from becoming a totalitarian world state? Einstein's proposal seemed to risk replacing national conflicts with global dictatorship. Einstein recognized these dangers, but considered them lesser evils than nuclear annihilation. He proposed that the world government should have limited powers focused on preventing war, not total sovereignty over all matters. Democratic procedures and constitutional limits would prevent tyranny. But again, Einstein provided few institutional details. His world government proposal reflects broader philosophical tensions in Einstein's political thought. He valued individual freedom highly and opposed totalitarianism. Yet his proposals for socialism and world government required concentrating significant power in collective institutions. How could such concentration avoid abuse? Einstein's answer relied on moral progress and rational education. He believed humans could learn to cooperate rather than compete, to identify with humanity rather than narrow groups. Creating just institutions required first creating just people through education emphasizing reason, compassion, and universal values. This optimism about human nature seems questionable given historical evidence. Humans have perpetrated horrific violence throughout history, despite education and moral teaching. Perhaps competitive tribal instincts are too deeply embedded in human nature to overcome through reason alone. Evolutionary psychology suggests that humans evolved to compete for resources, favor their own group, and distrust outsiders. These tendencies made evolutionary sense in ancestral environments, but create problems in modern societies with nuclear weapons and global interdependence. Overcoming them might require more than moral education, perhaps fundamental changes to human biology or artificial constraints on human behavior. Einstein rejected biological determinism, however. While acknowledging humans have aggressive tendencies, he insisted culture and reason could override them. Human nature is plastic enough that different social arrangements produce dramatically different behavior. The challenge is creating institutions that nurture humanity's better angels rather than its demons. Einstein's Zionism exemplified tensions in his political philosophy. Though culturally Jewish and supportive of Jewish welfare, Einstein rejected religious Judaism and Jewish nationalism. He supported establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine, primarily for practical reasons. Jews faced persecution globally and needed a safe refuge. But he opposed creating an exclusively Jewish state with Jewish political sovereignty. Einstein advocated for a binational state where Jews and Arabs shared power equally. He warned that Jewish nationalism would perpetuate the very tribal thinking he opposed in all forms. Treating Arabs as enemies or inferiors would betray Jewish ethical traditions and create endless conflict. Only cooperation and mutual respect could produce lasting peace. These views put Einstein at odds with mainstream Zionism. Most Zionist leaders wanted a Jewish state with Jewish majority rule. They considered Einstein's binationalism naive and dangerous, conceding too much to Arabs who might use power sharing to undermine Jewish security. Einstein responded that security through domination is illusory and that only justice produces genuine safety. After Israel's establishment in 1948, Einstein supported its existence but criticized its policies toward Arabs. He opposed territorial expansion, military actions against civilians, and laws discriminating against non-Jewish citizens. He declined an offer to become Israel's second president in 1952, partly because he disagreed with government policies. Einstein's position reflects his consistent universalism. No group deserves special privileges based on ethnicity or religion. Jewish suffering does not justify causing Arab suffering. The proper response to persecution is not establishing Jewish dominance, but creating societies based on equal rights for all. Critics argue that Einstein's universalism ignored political realities. Jews had faced 2 millennia of persecution culminating in the Holocaust. A state providing safe haven and self-determination seemed morally justified, even if imperfect. Einstein's binational alternative might have been impossible, given Arab rejection of any Jewish presence. Defenders respond that Einstein identified principles that remain relevant. Israel's ongoing conflict with Palestinians stems partly from treating it as an ethnic conflict between Jews and Arabs, rather than a human rights issue. Einstein's emphasis on universal values and equal dignity might have prevented decades of violence if adopted.
My daughter loves to read, and you guys always ask him where her books are from. They are from Axel Books. I order her books online.
The tension between group identity and universal values appears throughout Einstein's political thought. He valued Jewish cultural traditions, but rejected Jewish particularism. He supported democratic socialism, but opposed Soviet communism's totalitarian implementation. He advocated world government, but feared global tyranny. These tensions reflect a deeper philosophical problem. Can universal values actually guide political action, or must politics always compromise between competing particular interests? Einstein believed reason could identify universal principles: human equality, individual freedom, social cooperation. Politics should realize these principles through appropriate institutions. Realists in political philosophy argue this approach misunderstands politics' nature. Politics concerns power: who has it, how they obtained it, how they use it. Moral principles matter, but cannot override power considerations. Successful politics requires strategic calculation, compromise, and sometimes moral sacrifice. Einstein rejected political realism as cynical surrender. Yes, politics involves power, but power should serve justice rather than simply perpetuating itself. Treating power as independent of morality corrupts politics and produces tyranny. The challenge is not abandoning moral principles, but finding strategies to implement them despite power constraints. Contemporary political philosophy remains divided on these questions. Liberal philosophers like John Rawls argue that political institutions should be justified through principles everyone could rationally accept, similar to Einstein's universalism. Communitarian critics respond that universal principles ignore how deeply people are shaped by particular communities and traditions. Realist theorists maintain that power politics inevitably dominates despite moral ideals. Einstein's political activism also raises questions about scientists' public roles. Should scientists use their authority from scientific expertise to advocate political positions? Einstein believed scientists have special responsibility to guide society because they understand reason's power and nature's unity. Scientific thinking promotes clarity, skepticism of authority, and concern for evidence, which politics desperately needs. Critics argue that scientific expertise does not translate to political wisdom. Understanding physics does not make someone qualified to judge economic systems, political institutions, or cultural conflicts. Einstein's political pronouncements sometimes displayed naivete about political realities and institutional constraints. His scientific genius did not make him a political genius. Defenders respond that Einstein's universal perspective, trained by scientific cosmopolitanism, gave him valuable political insights even if he lacked policy expertise. His warnings about nuclear weapons and nationalism proved prescient. His emphasis on universal human values remains morally compelling, even if politically difficult to implement. The question remains relevant as contemporary scientists increasingly engage politically on issues like climate change, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology. Should they stick to providing technical information or actively advocate for particular policies? Einstein's example suggests that scientists not only can, but should engage politically when their expertise is relevant, while acknowledging the limits of their authority outside their technical domains. Einstein's political legacy is mixed. His democratic socialism never materialized, and contemporary capitalism has only intensified since his time. His world government proposal went nowhere, and nationalism remains powerful. His vision for binational coexistence in Palestine was rejected, and Israeli-Palestinian conflict continues. Yet Einstein's political philosophy retains influence through its articulation of universal humanistic values. His insistence that humans can transcend tribal loyalties, that reason should guide politics, and that justice matters more than power continues inspiring political idealists. Whether this inspiration is noble but futile utopianism or a necessary corrective to political cynicism remains debated.
Times are tough for UK business owners. Banks are tightening their credit criteria and rejecting more.
Part 8. Human Nature and Ethics.